Yes, Mr. Karadžić.
Evo kako se dalje odvijaju kontakti.
These are the further contacts between this accused person and the highest position Serb in the police, who is not a member of the SDS, of course. He is an expert, a police expert. And we see that this accused says, we been tricked at the MUP, especially the state security. Please don't let them not know. Nothing should be done single-handedly. This is not a private thing. The entire collegium should meet, and they should be told, this position is vacant, and we suggest this man for the job. I beg you to stop doing these things on a private basis. I'd like to draw your attention to what the president of the ruling party is saying here. It's not that he is saying that they should listen to him. It's the Serbs at the MUP who say, we don't want you to impose some Serb on us. We want to be the ones who are going to say which Serb deserves to be in that position. So it's not being done by Radovan Karadžić. It's Radovan Karadžić who is asking members of the police to defend their own people by putting professionals in the right positions. They, not the political party. And then we go on the 22nd of July. What I read out just now was on the 8th. This is the 22nd of July. Tell them not to play games. Look, they're in Prijedor in the afternoon, Friday afternoon. They positioned a man there, and the Muslim is a chief, the chief of defense is a Muslim, and the chief of the territorial defense is Muslim, and the commander should have been ours. That was one of the routine manipulations. The Serbs get a particular position and they don't allow it to happen, or they put a Muslim as deputy. But you see what the scenario is for bloodshed in Prijedor that will eventually happen, and we will see how. Let's move on. September, the 17th of September in 1991, Karadžić Plavšić. Today we'll probably talk to them, the Muslims that is, and I'll say, no talks until they stop deciding in MUP where each Serb is going to work, until they stop making decisions for us. We'll separate our part of the MUP there. We'll divide the MUP into cantons. You should know that we'll do that. They are proving to us how we are going to live here, in that state, that is. Excellencies, these were the shocks that we had to deal with, not on a weekly and monthly basis like in Croatia, but on an hourly basis. Now, this is the accused talking to the chief of the political party in Bosanska Krajina, Dr. Vukić. There are forces in Bosnia and Herzegovina who know they cannot achieve what they want without a war, and they need a reason for starting a war so that they could blame someone else. We must not give them the reason to start the war, and that's the most essential thing. By the way, both the international and our constitutional laws are on our side.
Radi zapisnika, pošto ekran ne ide u zapisnik, ja...
For the transcript, I think it's clear. Izetbegović wants to wage war. Babić is playing into his hands. Playing into the hands of warmongering Izetbegović. And this references to the late Milan Babić, who was in Krajina often because it was close to him. And as you will see, during the trial, he visited, and that was very difficult for us. We had to put out the fire every time he went there. Babić is playing right into the hands of this warmonger Izetbegović. You tell our people from Krajina, and that I said to Ali Izetbegović that he is preparing a war and that he is seeking assistance for a war. Please give him this answer of ours. Tell him there are forces in Bosnia that know that there cannot be a war if it doesn't come from above, and they need a pretext for war. They want to blame someone else. We should not give a pretext for war. That is the most important thing. International law and humanitarian law are on our side. The basic thing is that we shouldn't do anything that would be a pretext for war. The Muslims are strongly turning against Alia's war intentions. They have a republic, they have Yugoslavia. No one's saying we'll go to war. Alia would like to go to war to change that, and now Alia cannot explain to the Muslim people why he would go to war. The only thing that he needs now is an alibi for a war. We should not help him achieve that. This is a conversation between Professor Karadžić, member of the presidency, and Karadžić, where we say that our irresponsible people should not make silly statements. They won't do anything else. They shouldn't do anything that would be taken as an alibi for waging war. And now let us look at paragraphs 109 and 110 of the prosecution pretrial brief. This is how these two paragraphs treat the accused in relation to the MUP.
Of the conflict, the MUP played a significant role in establishing and maintaining Bosnian Serb authority over the territory and implementing the common criminal purpose. Following the takeovers, the MUP took a lead role in disarming, arresting, rounding up, detaining, beating, killings, and expelling Muslims and Croats. For months prior to its division, Karadžić contemplated the division of the MUP as an essential component of the division of B&H and the realization of the final goal to break off with Muslims and Croats forever. Eto, tako, tužilaštvo.
Well, that's what the prosecution says about Karadžić and Karadžić's wishes and intentions to create a MUP just like that, and in this way break up this idyll between the Muslims and the Serbs, and the prosecution is actually trying to reconstruct Serb intentions, as it were, on the basis of Serb behavior. Serb behavior is a response. It's a reaction. It is impermissible. It is impossible to say that that is intention rather than reaction. The SDA decides what the Serbs are going to do. It's not the Serbs who are deciding that, and that's the way it was throughout. From February 1992, after the elections, the Serbs' hand was forced, if I can put it that way, and we have to react to what they do, and otherwise we will go down the drain. Now let us look at our efforts to have a police. We actually asked the European community for constituent units to have their respective police forces. This is an excerpt from the Lisbon Agreement, or rather the Cutilleiro Plan.
Statement of principles for new constitutional arrangements for Bosnia and Herzegovina. D. The constituent units, the civil service, the police, the local judiciary, and any national guard established by a constituent unit would reflect proportionally the national composition of the constituent unit. Mi smo dobili od ambasadora Kutilera I evropske
From Ambassador Cutiliero and the European community, we got the right to our own police force. It was only then, on the 28th of February, that we decided, the Assembly decided, that we would have our own police force, but we did not establish it before the 1st of April. So our hand was forced. But nevertheless, the prosecution charges me that I did this in a premeditated fashion with the intention of achieving something at some point in time, instead of clearly seeing that this was caused by SDA behavior.
I za sve to vreme do tada
Throughout that time, we were aware of the secret agreement between Kučan, Tuđman, and Izetbegović to go to war. And we are aware of the information to the effect that Izetbegović was asked in the second half of 1991 why he did not go to war with Yugoslavia. And he says, I will, but I'm just waiting for the right moment. That is the moment when he is given encouragement. And from mid-October onwards, he does away with any possible solution for a peaceful settlement.
Tužilaštvo ima nekoliko ugaonih kamena.
The OTP has a few cornerstones upon which they would like to construct Serb guilt and Serb responsibility. One of the things that the OTP charges me with is the paper versions variant A and B. Unfortunately, that was not created within the SDS. We did not discuss it. We did not adopt it. And there are no traces of any such thing. And if that had happened, there would have been traces because of all of our transcripts were seized. Old officers, pensioned officers, when they realized what Martin Špegel recommended to Croats, you go to one apartment, dum-dum, and you shoot him in the stomach, etc., etc. When they saw that in Sarajevo, their apartments were being marked and that an assassin may ring their doorbell and bang, shoot them in the stomach, they therefore prepared some guidelines as to what should be done in order to prevent a war from happening, and that kind of thing from happening. There is no political party and no person like Karadžić who could do anything about it. If there is chaos, no one knows what they're going to do. So now let us see what this paper that I refer to says.
Šta kaže ovaj papir? Kaže tužilaštvo, paragraf 36.
Paragraph 36.
About 20th of December 1992, at a meeting in the Holiday Inn in Sarajevo, Karadžić distributed to municipality leaders instructions for the establishment of clandestine bodies, the Serbian crisis staff, A and B. The confidential instructions established the bodies that would be among the primary instruments through which Karadžić and other members of BSL asserted control over territories and removed non-Serbs. A vidite šta piše u tom.
Look at what it says in this piece of paper. It's the pensioned officers who actually provided this. In the implementation of all these measures, ensure respect for the national and other rights of members of all peoples, and subsequently ensure their involvement in the administrative authorities to be set up by the Assembly of the Serb people in the municipality. Again, we have to view all of this in the context of the conference, the Lisbon Conference, and the Cutiliero Plan. We know that the SDA is going to try to derogate it by way of war. This was envisaged to avoid war and to avoid chaos and to preserve the heritage of the conference and to keep people out of harm's way. There is no need to emphasize to what extent the interests of others are being taken into account, especially by these officers who were in favor of brotherhood and unity anyway. The other cornerstone of the OTP are strategic objectives. Strategic objectives were not adopted. As a matter of fact, they were just stated to the Assembly on the 12th of May that they would be the platform for the conference. When it was clear that there would be a war and that we would elect a presidency was indeed elected, and two members of the presidency of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Mrs. Biljana Plavšić and Mr. Nikola Koljević, and the third one was yours truly, elected to the presidency. We then stated what our position would be vis-à-vis the European community in continuing our efforts to resolve the crisis through peaceful means. Since there was a war on, we could no longer have enclaves on a discontinuous basis because people would not dare live there. Something changed in the objectives, or rather, our position changed vis-à-vis the negotiations with the European community. A month later, in June or July, the presidency made a decision. The strategic objectives were not made public yet, but then a decision was made to make them public and to send them to the European community, or rather the negotiators, together with the map. So this is no secret document, secret piece of paper. This is the terribly unfair judgment against Krajić. This is what it says with regard to this matter. It would be incorrect to place these goals on a pedestal, as the prosecution does, for in the final analysis, they are anodyne statements serving as official state policy and even qualifying for publication in the Bosnian Serb Republic's official gazette. If one is inclined to find in them insidious hidden meanings, it is because of the context and the events that followed. An anachronistic reading of the May goals is not only inadvisable, it misses the point. Just as an anachronistic reading of the December instructions, that's variants A and B, misses the point. The instructions and the goals lacked substance and utility, but they did symbolize a new central authority at a time when the old order had disintegrated. This chamber shows that we are right to reorganize when the old system was collapsing, and parts of this disintegrated system are flying at us with the aim of destroying us.
So this paragraph deals with two cornerstones in the indictment against me. And and as far as both of them are concerned, the prosecution is not right. But although this judgment was made earlier, and in the final judgment this was not appealed, the prosecution still maintains that it could use this against me. Now let's see, to wind up this area, how Lord Owen sees the situation, who came to the Bosnia negotiations very anti-Serb in sentiment because he had the wrong information given to him. And he was soon to be surprised, as were indeed other people from the United Nations who came and thought the Serbs were brutal and then changed their mind. This is what Lord Owen says in his book, Balkan Odyssey. The image of unarmed Bosnian Muslims was not changed even when Ali Izetbegovic openly admitted on television that the Bosnian government had smuggled weapons through secret channels. 30,000 rifles and machine guns, 20 million bullets, 37 mines, 4,600 anti-tank rockets, 20,000 grenades, 90,000 uniforms and 12,000 boots. And I should like to add to that, from the Muslim sources in Sarajevo, there were 80,000 mines produced. That is their confirmation. In that same Sarajevo, which was allegedly under siege and mistreated by the Serb army, they had a factory in which they manufactured 80,000 mortars and mines. And the prosecution persists on the basis of our reactions, panic and in defense, is trying to construe this and present it as being something that we had planned a long time ago, whereas in actual fact we were responding to the challenges of Hasan Cengic and others, the ones they laid in our path according to the Islamic declaration as a pretext for chaos, because they said, we can't wait for natural pretexts and causes. We must construct our own. Now, the SDS, how would the Serbs, the SDS, under regular conditions have reacted? And normal conditions would have been to accept the agreements offered up by the Serbs or by others. What would have happened in those regular circumstances? How could they have planned separating parts of Bosnia-Herzegovina that they considered to be Serbian? The prosecution skips over that and says, how did the SDS dare engage in the acts they engaged? Now, this ethnic mixture is true of the SDA too. They too did not dare and should not have engaged in forcible secession from Yugoslavia, because we are so ethnically mixed. So we were not in favor of stepping down from Yugoslavia, stepping out from Yugoslavia. But if they left Yugoslavia, then we wanted to secure our positions in Bosnia. But we're all a mixed-up population there, you see. Now we have a well-known session held on the 24th of January, and this accused is advocating that the agreement with Cengic about regionalization should be accepted. It could have been done within a fortnight by the end of January, and then at the end of February there's a referendum. And here's what I say. I say that I and all of us can now imagine what would happen, gentlemen, if, God forbid, unrest were to break out between the ethnic groups and have a religious war in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and we can draw it on the board. The Serbs would flee from Muslim areas and the Muslims from Serb areas. The Croats would go to their own regions. There would be a lot of shooting along the way. Cities would tumble. There would be bloodshed up to our knees. And where would we be then? The same place that we are now. The Serbs in the Serb regions, the Muslims in Muslim regions, and the Croats in Croatian regions. Homogeneous. And what need we do? Then we would once again have to sit down to the negotiating table and to put 3 signatures to an agreement, because without 3 signatures to an agreement, there's no solution to Bosnia-Herzegovina. And here's the proof of it. On the 24th of January, this accused here says it is clear to one and all, and it was clear to him too, that there was no fait accompli. But, and we're talking about January 1992, a month before the referendum. Now, where is this common criminal purpose or joint criminal enterprise that this accused stands accused of along with his associates? Where is it? When we say, unless we reach an agreement, we will have such and such. And there's another portion where this accused says let us avoid having the situation slip out of our control. We are in the hands of chaos. We cannot bridle chaos. So those are matters which guided us in seeking from Cutillero to enable us to have our police force. And it was accepted. Now I'd like to draw your attention to the following. Let's take a look at Sarajevo itself. This is the broader area around Sarajevo. The green line is, or rather the blue line is the Serbs. And where it says HVO, that area there, on the one hand, facing us we have the HVO, on the other side we have the Muslims, and then there's us. So we are being encircled by them. We are under their siege. May I be allowed to get up to show you this on the map? This is the Sarajevo area, broader area. We'll explain this later on, but these are Serb territories, and they're under Serb control. Not all of them, but some of them are. Now, part of the Serb territory is surrounded by Croatian and Muslim forces. So we are also under siege. This is the city proper, and we have a divided town. And you'll see why the Serbs are around Sarajevo, located around Sarajevo. Let's go back to the ethnic map, or rather, let's have the ethnic map of Sarajevo put up on our screens, please. Microphone, please.
Ovo je od istog onog instituta koji je
It was compiled by the same institute as the Bosnia map earlier on, but this is the city of Sarajevo. And you can see the borders. The white, thin white line is the city proper, the inner city. The blue are the settlements and districts where the Serbs were in a significant majority, and the light blue areas where they were a relative majority. So this was the city of Sarajevo, entirely Serb. As you can see, it was the property of the Pavlović family, the squires. When the Turks arrived, the family was destroyed, but the Serbs remained living in and around Sarajevo, and for a long time they were the majority population in Sarajevo. When the war broke out, the Serbs managed to protect this area in the center of town. May we zoom into that and see the front line there?
Da li imamo to nemam ja na ekranu to.
I can't see that on my screen. Do I have it?
Da. Sada vidimo.
Now we can see that the Serbs have succeeded in protecting part of town, and it's the well-known Serb settlement of Grbavica on the left bank of the Miljacka River. On the right bank, Karadžić, a Serb settlement, was one they did not succeed in defending it, and there was not a single person left living there. 250 people at the hands of Mr. Izetbegovic were killed. Mladić's house was there as well. Luckily, his family managed to escape, but the whole area was destroyed. Now, Your Excellencies, take a look at this. The Serbs here are only controlling their own parts of town. That's all. The city proper and the surrounding parts. And those Serb territories are located under a Muslim siege, surrounded by Muslim forces, the Muslim Croatian army. Now, I'd like to ask you to focus on the Karadžić municipality in the lower left-hand corner. Can we zoom into the Karadžić area, please? It's on the other map. The left left-hand corner, the prosecutor says that the Serbs took over control of Karadžić where they were in the majority. It is true that we were the minority, but all this green area to the very left, to the extreme left, is Karadžić municipality, which the Serbs were not in control of. The Serbs only controlled the Serbian part of Karadžić. And throughout Bosnia-Herzegovina, wherever they say or write that the Serbs had assumed control over such and such a municipality in which they were a minority, that is just not true. It's not correct. All the Serbs were in control of was the Serb portion of the municipality. Then it says Hrasnica down there. Number 5. Number 5 is Hrasnica. Half of Hrasnica is half of Ilija municipality. The Serbs only controlled the Serb half of that municipality, the Ilija municipality. They never attempted to take control of Hrasnica. Can you see that? I think you can see number 5. Number 5 is Hrasnica on this map. And opposite Hrasnica, to the right, is Lukavica, Dobrinja, and so on and so forth. So, in actual fact, we didn't control any Muslim settlement, nor did we attempt to do so, whereas the Muslims did control significant Serb areas, and nobody remained alive there in mid-May. The people had to flee those regions. Now, the truth set in stone or marble that Sarajevo wasn't under a siege is true. The truth of it is it was a divided city, both the city proper and the area around it. And on this map, we can see the city proper, and we see the front lines, which are being held at 100 to 200 meters between each other, and sometimes the distance between them is just 15 meters. Sometimes in one flat you have the Muslims, in another you have the Serbs. And here you have the division line. I would like to be allowed to get up again and approach the screen so that I can explain this to you using the map. This is my city. I've spent 50 years of my life living in it. This is Grbavica. This is the Miljacka River going across this area. The Serbs protected Grbavica because it was a majority population over there. Could the accused kindly be provided with a microphone? Thank you.
Mr. Karadžić, could you start again with your microphone on?
Aha. Da. Dakle, evo vidimo sada liniju fronta.
Now we see the front line. And the front line follows along and stretches. Well, the two lines run alongside each other. The red line contains the Muslim and Serb front line. We are adjacent to each other there. And when somebody says that a Serb shell, and you will hear from prosecution witnesses, all they can say is the direction the shell came from. Now, who's going to say, if you look at this, what were legitimate targets in this area, in the old part of town? What were the legitimate targets that the Serb side had the right to respond to? I'd like to ask you to focus on this area. We still don't have the entire map, and we will in due course when the trial gets going. But look at all the schools and nurseries that were transferred into military premises, turned into military premises. The nursery called Pčelica, kindergarten Pčelica, in the Svetozar Marković area. It was the command post of the 105th Brigade, a battalion of the police, in a kindergarten, mark you. So that is the a city that was helpless and innocent, and there were always 3 times more soldiers than in the Serbian Romania Corps. They always had 3 times the manpower that we did. Here you have the command post of the 105th Mountain Brigade, as I said, the Razija Omanović Primary School this time.
Ovo je staro jezgro grada.
This is the old city core, the old part of town called Başçarşıya, dating back to Turkish times, and we're being shot at from there, and we're suffering losses. And you'll be able to see that we have mortars on this bank over here, from which were most probably used to shoot at Markale, because that's the general axis, the direction from which the shells are coming towards that part of town. I think that you have that in the lists, that is listed. It's somewhere around there in the Bistrik area.
Da. Eto. Vatreni položaj.
Fire positions, Bistrik area, Bistrik Street, mortars, a battery of mortars. So it's a slope facing town, facing their positions. We were behind them to the south. And if you hold that position, you can shoot at any part of town whenever you feel like it. Now look at this very narrow part of town, how many legitimate targets there are. These are 10% of the legitimate targets that were 10% of what we're going to show as being legitimate targets, but we are going to show the abuse of hospitals, schools, kindergartens turned into military facilities. Here we have the command of the 152nd Mountain Brigade, which is a foreign language school in Vace Miskin Street. It's been renamed now, but it's the same street where there was that explosion in the bread line on the 27th of May, 1992. Here we have the command post of the military police.
Dakle, to je evo Başçarşıya.
Here we have Başçarşıya, the old town center. And downstream from there, to the left, could you zoom in to the left?
Još prema Skenderiji.
Can we move to Skenderia? Opposite Skenderia, there we have Dositeva Street.
Još je levo, ja mislim to.
Pan left a bit more. Upstream, here we have the command post of the 105th, and it's the Shipad building, a civilian facility turned into a military facility. And if from a flat roof of that building they shot at us and we returned fire, they would portray this as non-selective shelling of the town by the Serb army.
Ovo je logistička baza.
This is a logistic space.
Helikopterska Dositeva.
On the Dositeva Street, now called Branislava Đurđeva, number 2. This is a helicopter fleet in the center of Sarajevo. This is a first-rate legitimate military target.
Evo Marindvora.
Here we see Marindvor, which is in the old town. Immediately next to it is a Holiday Inn hotel where foreign journalists were residing. And around this area was the stage of all these stage-managed events and the shells. For example, if you look at the Catholic Cathedral, this was the logistic space of the 105th Mountain Brigade. Right next to the church. This is the street that leads to Vrbanja Bridge. There's a firing position, a mortar firing position at the corner of this street. So you see these firing positions in the center of the town. Also, 12.7 was submachine or a gun nest in the center of the town. This is a sniper position at the corner of the streets Gundulića and Branimira Ćosići. Now we are going to see how many schools and kindergartens were abused. This is a faculty near Vrbanja, and that's what we see a minute ago. Now, the museum building had a firing position as well in it. We were being shot from that position, and we had to respond, and we were accused of firing at the museum, PAM 12.7. So if we are attacking this position, we were accused of firing indiscriminately at Sarajevo. There is a footage there where Mladić says, turn the weapons at Velesići, there are no Serbs there, but the one firing knows what the targets are. The targets are legitimate targets, because we know that there were legitimate targets in Velesići. It was a firing position of the 101st Central Transbuća Potok, and there was a maintenance repair shop for armored vehicles. Now, the building of the Transport Institute, which was another legitimate target. This is a forward command post in Velesići in the auto repair shop. And when Mladić says target Velesići, he's not referring to civilian facilities, he is referring to legitimate targets. On the other hand, the OTP thinks that although we know what it was all about, we had to say a full sentence, fire at the car repair shop in Velesići, which is a command post. This is not how this is being done. The Kosovo hospital now, the OTP witnesses are going to confirm that they riddled it with bullets from their own weapons. And this is a legitimate target in the yard of the Kosovo hospital, which belonged to the 105th Brigade.
To je fakultet.
Now, this is the physical education faculty, which is a university facility, also abused. And there's another faculty building of the civil engineering, which was occupied by the 105th Brigade. The Karadžić Elementary School, I don't believe it's called that any longer. Karadžić was an ancestor of mine who was born in Serbia, who carried out the reform of the Serbian culture and Serbian alphabet.
Mislim da je dovoljno. Sada
I think this was enough. Now, I would like to enumerate for you things that can be said with relation to Sarajevo.
Dakle, Sarajevo je u...
So, overall, Sarajevo was built on the Serb-owned land. For a long time, it was populated by a majority of Serbs. Some of its neighborhoods have always been majority Serb. Some quarters had Serb minority before the war, and especially before the Second World War, some of the neighborhoods were even 100% Serb. Before the breakout of this war, and with regard to the conference on Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Serbian side did not propose a division of time, but regionalization of the town like Brussels and like it was done in Switzerland. So we were in favor of a transformation similar to the one carried out in Brussels. As you know, there are 17 boroughs in Brussels. None of them are mixed. They're either Flemish or
Team.
balloon. But yet it is only the Balkan peoples who are being asked to try to live in a melting pot that will be pregnant with tensions and other problematic things. So the request was to transform Sarajevo into one municipality and to remove at least one of the reasons for tensions. This precludes any intention of terrorizing the town. Your Excellencies, in the map that you saw, we didn't have professional army. These were the people living 50 meters from the front line. They had nowhere to escape. They had to fight 50 meters from their own home. They were sleeping in their homes. They were not billeted in barracks. These were people's army. They had to fight for Sarajevo. Had the war been avoided, Sarajevo would have been transformed into several municipalities, and each municipality would take care of its own affairs. The so-called gerrymandering was carried out in the whole of Bosnia and Herzegovina, including Sarajevo. Gerrymander was a master of election manipulation. He managed to establish such constituencies so that weaker parties would win the elections. And this phenomenon of gerrymandering was very much present in Bosnia and Herzegovina. For example, Hrasnica was attached to Ilija so that the Serbs would not have their own municipality. Rajlovac, the place where Mr. Krajišnik hailed, used to be a municipality, was attached to Novigrad, where Serbs became a minority, and any development of Rajlovac was halted. We are going to demonstrate to you this gerrymandering process applied in the whole of Bosnia, which rendered Serbian areas totally devastated. So the plan for Sarajevo was to be reorganized administratively, and it was necessary anyway to make smaller municipalities. Previously, there were enormous municipalities, and nobody could do anything without resorting to bribe. Even without the war and without the crisis, this should have been done. Sarajevo was composed of 10 municipalities before the war. The Serbs only had control in Serbian municipalities, and in Muslim majority municipalities, they only control Serbian neighborhoods. If we can have back the map with the front line, I have it on my screen, yes. To the far left is Pale, and this is Renovica. The Muslim municipality of Pale was something that we never tried to take and place under our control. So to the far right, yes, to the far right. The part of the town controlled by the SDA police and army was taken over by the 1st Corps of the BH Army and later by the 12th Division. They had between 35,000 and 80,000 troops. They had their legitimate targets. Kindergarten Pčelica, elementary school Beta Isaković, Piraz, Cafe Pastrma, Ferhadia, which is a foreign language school, military police on Maršala Tita Street, Šipad, also civilian facilities. Flats in the well-known elite Carrington building was a legitimate target because it was full of army troops, mortars, and other lethal and combat assets. PAM was Upon was on Verbania Most, which is mortar. So during the trial, we are going to establish very precisely and tell you an absolute truth about all these targets were located. The United Nations are going to say that never in Sarajevo it was the Serbs who started fighting. We kept saying, let us wait for a political solution with the sole purpose of saving people's lives. The Muslims boasted that this internal line towards the city proper was, at the beginning of war, 42 kilometers long. By the end of war, they boasted of this having extended to 60 kilometers. If you take into account that this was urban warfare, to advance 22 kilometers in city warfare is a clear indication who was attacking in Sarajevo and who was defending themselves in Sarajevo.
Kao I u celoj Bosni, ni u Sarajevu Srbi nisu.
In Bosnia and in Sarajevo, Serbs never wanted to capture more territories. Quite the contrary, they were prepared to make some concessions for the sake of peace. We never did anything in the town that was contrary to our interests, and our interest was to revive the peace process and to acquire and accomplish 3 signatures that would spell a peaceful solution. There was never intentional shelling. We are going to prove here that all massive killings were the result of a cunning strategy as called by Sefer Kalilovic of Izetbegović's policy. This was war tricks. These were 4 war tricks aimed at bringing in foreign troops and foreign intervention. What the young Muslims wanted can only be achieved through terror or by foreign intervention. The SDA failed to manage to achieve that through terror. They tried to maintain terror and to invite foreign intervention. All the mediators will tell you that everything that happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina that was done by the Muslim side was with the purpose of drawing in NATO and Western countries into war on their side.
Ja sam uveren da
I am convinced that regardless of all the reforms and innovations in the international jurisprudence, the principle in dubio pro reo is still valid. It is sufficient for us that we know that we can prove that they did shell their own people and that they killed all their own people from snipers. And we would like to demand the OTP to prove that this was done by the Serbs. We don't need to prove that this was done by the Muslim. Once there is evidence that they did that or that they did that as well, then we have to identify which killings were not committed by them and to prove that they were committed by Serbs. Our retaliation, and I think that my letter to General Milovanovic is quoted, where I say that foreign observers are not blaming us for retaliation, but they are just objecting to the number of mortar shells that we are using. And my response was that they have more troops, but that we had better weapons. And I really criticized our side for doing that, but it turned out that that was not exactly true. The fact remains that somebody who didn't have enough troops could retaliate with more mortar shells. You will see on around 10th of July that we said we can reduce shelling, but we have to bring a brigade from Krajina. We have to maintain a strategic balance, otherwise the people will vanish. It is said in the minutes, yes, we're going to reduce the shelling, but we have to bring a brigade from the Krajina in order to enable these people to defend themselves. This is not a war between armies. This is the war between peoples. Wherever SDA army trod, there was nothing left alive.
U Sarajevu trajao.
The war in Sarajevo lasted for about 1,200 days, whereas in the biblical apocalypse, the number is 1,260. The city was never under blockade when it was not necessary in military terms. You will see when we talk about the Croats from Bosnia confirming that units were able to enter and exit Sarajevo as they pleased. And you can see from the BH army orders that a certain brigade should be returned to city. Concerning transportation, it was I who proposed at the beginning of war for Sarajevo to become an open city and to be under the control of the UN. Izetbegovic didn't need that. He wanted to have influence on the international community with emotional demonstrations and thereby provoke interventions. We thought that any restrictions imposed should pertain only to military transport. However, they never allowed this transportation to be reduced because the prices on the black market would fall if that happened. If you look at the city proper, which was under control of the SDA army, did not get a single drop of water, not a single cubic meter of gas that hadn't crossed the first territory, the Serbian territory first. We never deprived them of anything of that sort intentionally. How can you call this terrorizing the city? Whenever we had little water, we shared it with you. All the wells are in the Serbian territory, and we shared these water sources with them. There is a letter in which I'm writing to our generals, and they were resentful over the fact that we were allowing all the humanitarian aid to pass through that was distributed only to Muslims and not to Serbs. Later on, we received maybe 1/3 or 1/4, where the accused said that the civilians were not our opponents or our enemies. We're not going to wage war by using water and food. Your Excellencies, in this area between Hrasnica and this narrow passage on the front line is an airfield that we handed over to the United Nations in July 1992. Over 10,000 humanitarian flights landed at this airfield without a single incident from the Serbian side. They shot at the planes occasionally in order to blame us.
Humanitarian flights. Is that terrorizing a city? That is what the Serbian side ensured. And it is we who held the airport, and we handed it over to the United Nations. Thousands of convoys of humanitarian aid entered Sarajevo through Serb territory, trucks and the like. The documentation of General Valgren, Mr. Akashi, and others will show you that the incident with convoys were only due to irregularities caused by the convoys themselves. That is what Valgren explains in his letter, and that is confirmed by the representatives of the UN. They say Serbs do not make any problems regarding convoys, but if there is a superfluous truck or there an extra truck, then they have to take a second look. This has to do with elementary military skill. If something is not in line with the list provided, then that's the way it has to be dealt with. There would always be TV crews there, CNN and the like. There would always be someone who was not informed. There would be a soldier who was not informed. And soldiers did not have the authority to be creative and flexible, as it were. They would be announced at one bridge, and then they would appear at another bridge. And the guard there would not know a thing about it. So this is our town. 200,000 Serbs live there. Almost 30,000 declared themselves as Yugoslavs, but almost all of them were Serbs. It's a Serb city as well. I lived in that city of my own free will because I loved the city. I love it to this day, and we're never going to give up on it. We have our own part of town. Had our proposal been accepted that it be declared an open city, there would have been no casualties. Had the transformation of municipalities been agreed to, Serb, Croat, and Muslims, see the brown color here, all the way up to Ilija, there would be peace and prosperity. However, a policy that wanted to have 100% authority in 100% of Bosnia against the Christian majority led to what it led to. And the prosecution believes that we did not have any right whatsoever to protect ourselves, or that we had no right to defend ourselves. I would now like to draw your attention to something that I'm going to read out, an excerpt from General Rose's book. He says, the reports of the French were a lot more serious. Interpreters note we do not have the text. They opened fire at their own citizens. This was a rule rather than an exception. Bosnia Brigadier Hajlurahović, nicknamed Italian, and General Jovan Divjak were the persons I told that the first examination of the crater of the bomb that had exploded in Markale, or rather grenade, showed that it was fired from the Bosnian side. The room fell silent, and Hajlurahović looked at me in a hostile way. Obviously, the shell had been fired from a very short distance, or perhaps it was planted on the spot and activated. Then I asked him why they moved parts of this.
Given that interpreters do not have that script, could you slow down?
Izvinjavam se.
I do apologize.
Zatim sam ga pitao.
Then I asked him why they had removed some parts of the exploded shell before the UN forces had arrived on the spot. You will see, Excellencies, that this prosecution calls as their witnesses and expert witnesses from the UN people who are not those who are the first to arrive on the scene. We don't see their findings. They call a man who came 40 minutes after the incident in August 1995 and 7 days after the incident in 1994. When we ask these people what the best time is for investigating this kind of incident, they say the very next minute, right after the incident. That is to say that the first to arrive on the scene stand the best chance of providing accurate findings. The OTP has mislaid or put away those documents or persons who were the first to arrive on the scene because obviously they don't like their findings. Lord David Owen, in his book, The Balkan Odyssey, says, and I quote, interpreter's note again, we do not have the original document, the Muslim government prevented the departure of their own people through internal obstacles and bureaucratic red tape. It was the army, not the government, saying that able-bodied men were not allowed to leave between the ages of 18 and 45, that is, as well as women, or rather, up until the age of 65, and women up until the age of 60, because they were indispensable for the defense of the city. However, their main reason was different. The Serb siege in the propaganda war led to the compassion of the world. Therefore, it was necessary for the elderly and children to remain there. That was their most emotional propaganda weapon in order to draw the Americans into the war, because they didn't want to get weaker in any way.
Dalje.
Furthermore,
Cilj i sredstvo da se
so that was the objective, to draw the Americans and NATO into the war. That is what had to do with the shelling of Sarajevo. At one point, General Rose says it would be a lot easier if they did not fire at their own people, at their own population. The war would end a lot quicker. We're not talking about in dubio pro reo. We have proof that they did that kind of thing. You saw the footage yesterday, the empty marketplace. You also saw footage of preparations that led to that incident. I am truly surprised, not only at the life sentence imposed on General Karadžić, but also by the fact that the OTP continued to use that in the indictments against General Milosevic, myself, etc. Therefore, we have to be aware of the fact that it would be a very good thing if the trial chamber would instruct the OTP to have a good look at the indictment yet again and to see what the detriment is when there are proceedings only against one side, the weaker one at that. One that was on the defensive all the time, that awaited a political solution. How can that side be declared the belligerent side, the aggressive side, and a terrorist against their own city, from which 80% of the Serbian population had been expelled into the suburbs? I believe that if they were to have a careful look at all the material they have available, they would not only withdraw the indictment against me, but they would even ask for a review of the judgments against my generals to save the idea of international justice, to save the idea of courts of this nature. The idea of international justice stands a grave chance of being compromised altogether. If these proceedings continue, I shall prove what it was that happened in Bosnia-Herzegovina. You will see that it is primarily part of the international community that is responsible. Well, first and foremost, the SDA, but they couldn't have done a thing had they not had the encouragement to opt for all, for the Croats and later on the Islamic fundamentalists, allegedly the Muslim people. Had they not opted for that, this could not have happened. The idea of the fundamentalists is still Ottoman rather than democratic. You would still have the Begs, Silajdžić and others, who would be the sole benefactors. I mean, they would impose that kind of regime, and they would be the ones who would get all the benefits. Do we have more time before the break, or?
We can go on for 5 minutes, but if you wish, we can take a break now.
Pa, ja sam mislio da sam možda dovoljno rekao.
Well, I thought that perhaps I had said enough about general matters concerning Sarajevo, because during the proceedings we shall be dealing with Sarajevo in detail. This defense does not agree with the approach taken by the OTP that some Serbs killed some Muslims. We want to know exactly what happened. I still don't have regular forensic material for Markale 1, for Markale 2, for the bread line in Vasemiskina, for other incidents of mass suffering. I'm convinced that in Markale 1 and Markale 2, perhaps there weren't any civilian casualties at all. Perhaps it is corpses that were planted throughout. And the representatives of the UN are going to confirm here that their predecessors had warned them to be very careful about this kind of planting of bodies throughout Sarajevo, with a view to accusing the Serb side for that. How are we going to deal with this? Since we cannot count on objective investigations of an investigating judge, we cannot count on the modesty of the OTP that they should take care as to what they're doing. We can count on you only and you alone, that the trial chamber is going to prevent this kind of trickery or planting and not allow the codification of lies and tricks that are supposed to remain in the history of our people as some kind of truth. We saw yesterday what happened in Markale. It is only someone who wishes to believe that can believe that, and even that with great difficulty. If you think straight, you see that the Serbs could not have done it. You see that it was staged. But do you realize what that does to the people down there, to the Serbs and the Muslims? We're going to talk about Srebrenica today as well. We're going to see what these false myths and false victims do to the souls of the ordinary people who cannot penetrate the essence of the matter. We have to see what this is going to do to the future and what kind of seed of future hatred and suffering has been sown in this way for our children and grandchildren, whoever believes this, who codifies these things, saying that the Serbs did something that they never did. Whoever does that ensured the continuation of further conflicts and slaughters. Whenever there is a crisis in the world, as has been the case so far, it always turns out to be a fratricidal war as well. Perhaps I could stop at this point.
We'll break for half an hour.
All rise, if you would.